country is looking to the end of this month for the third and final part of the state capture report to be released. But it also comes amid growing concerns that the recommendations of the inquiry may be difficult, if not virtually impossible to implement. Former Public Protector Thuli Madonsela says with 3 years already having been spent hearing testimony at the inquiry, she did not expect the Commission to order further investigations into those who are implicated. For more on her thoughts, she joins us now via our video link. And Prof, it's great to have you on the program as always. Thanks indeed for making time. I can't help but, as a start, think of the big story from the last 24 hours. So allow me to take advantage by just gauging your reaction to the recommendation of Mandisa Maya as the country's next Chief Justice. As far as you're concerned, is it a far gone conclusion that the post is hers?
Greetings, Ayanda, and to the listeners. Thank you for the privilege. It is a recommendation that, of course, should be cherished because it will be the first time that the top judge in this country is a woman. I did tweet yesterday and people were a little bit confused and some annoyed, just for people to understand how the process unfolds. And you must remember that I was a member of the panel that advised the president, and we're acutely aware of what our parameters are, and I would expect that the JSE also knows what its parameters are. It's just one of the recommending structures. So the JSE is one structure that has to be consulted. It's not even recommendation, it's to be consulted. So because the presumption is that the president selects, almost like the vetting system in the US, and then consults with the JSE and leaders of parties that are represented in the National Assembly.
Yeah. I mean, there's also no telling how long the president will take to actually come out with a final announcement. Is there any kind of time period, for lack of a better term, that he's entitled to before there's a reasonable expectation that he says something?
I'm not aware of any timeline, but I would believe that the president is aware that it is an important decision.
Yeah.
And it must be made as swiftly as possible.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for your indulgence. We were hoping to speak to you about your thoughts around the findings of the state capture inquiry, so let's do exactly that. You've raised concerns in the public domain already about the inquiry recommending further investigations in a context where technically you had recommended that the inquiry itself investigate what's taking place. You saying this might lead to the criminal trail turning into a cold case. What do you mean by that?
Well, firstly, I do want to make a point that I'm not trying to throw a wet blanket on this important work that acting Chief Justice Zondo has done. I teach investigations, and the manual that the Public Protector uses at this moment was designed by myself based on training that I received and reading that I've done on investigations. And therefore, you want to investigate as soon as possible. You want to control the scene of the crime as soon as possible. And state capture is a crime because it's the crime of corruption. And therefore, it would be ideal that the Commission's conclusions are conclusive. But if there's one or two things that they just are referring to other bodies to tie up, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. The implication there, if I read between the lines, is you saying that it's not just one or two things that need to be tied up. It's a whole range of things. And I guess it also brings into sharp focus other concerns you've raised in the past about the scope of this inquiry. Is that something we should also be looking at critically, given just even the volume of its findings and the time that they've spent to even get here?
Well, during his interview, Acting Chief Justice Zondo conceded that the scope of the inquiry was increased by President Zuma, and therefore that widened the jurisdiction and the responsibility, which made swiftness difficult. But I think they've done the best they could. It's just going forward, though, I do think we may have to come up with a playbook for Commission of Inquiry investigations in this country, because this is not the first and it's not the last. And with investigations, we came to the conclusion that we needed to design a playbook, which is why I did the a standard operating protocol on investigations for my team. And also, I was very big on training investigators because it's a difficult task to investigate. It's not any lawyer or any person that can do it.
Yeah, especially because the NPA is going to rely on the quality of investigations taking place if there is to be any kind of prosecution. But I want to just unpack this idea of a playbook a bit more if I can. What kind of form should that take? I mean, it's difficult to say, right, how people should proceed because each case will be so different and their complexities are going to change depending on the context.
You're absolutely right there, Amanda. The starting point, Ayanda, sorry, I now just renamed you. The starting point would be the male and guardian case. You probably, a very young generation, you might not remember. But the male and guardian case, which was the case of the male and guardian versus the public protector, ended up with a Supreme Court of Appeal case that defined what is a proper investigation. For example, it was said as an investigator, you can't sit there and wait for people to bring evidence to you as a judge does. It's your job to go out there and find the information. So when we worked on the SOP for the public protector, we took that into account. And I think whoever designs a playbook for the conduct of commissions of inquiry would better start with the male and guardian case, because a commission of inquiry is an investigation. It's not a judicial process.
Yeah. Given all of that, we're sitting now with a report which was so large that it had to be broken down into 3 parts. Each of those parts has a number of volumes, and it's easy to be overwhelmed, at the very least, by the details. Given our track record and how we've responded to findings of any inquiry, how confident are you feeling that we'll be able to drill down to the level of accountability that's needed for people to feel like this was a worthwhile exercise?
I think Deputy Chief Justice Zondo has done an excellent job in making the reports easy to read. The details are easy to follow. The conclusions are easy to understand. The people involved and the dots that are connecting are easy to understand. So if anybody was to say they don't know what to do, they would be just refusing to do the obvious.
It's also difficult to speak conclusively about the report until the final report itself has landed. However, is that enough reason for us not to necessarily get the ball rolling, as has been suggested in some instances, I think even by the President himself?
I do think that the NPA and the South African Police Services could begin the process, but I wouldn't start prosecuting. I would start building a case. I wouldn't start prosecuting on certain matters where part of the piece of the puzzle is missing. There are matters where the matter is concluded between these 2 reports and the NPA could start moving.
Really do appreciate it. Professor Thuli Madonsela, as the former public protector, now works with Stellenbosch University. Once again, Prof, thanks very much as always.